Hey there, fellow explorers. Welcome back to another episode of US History Understanding This Country. If you are new here, a hearty welcome aboard. And for all my regular travelers, it's great to have you back. If you are enjoying this journey as much as I am, please take a moment to follow, rate, and share this podcast. It really helps me keep the wagon rolling. Now, today's episode. Oh boy, we have got quite a ride ahead. We are heading to the place once known as the Lone Star Republic, a bold little country that briefly stood on its own before becoming part of the United States. Yep, we are talking about Texas. We will witness the settlers fighting against Mexico's rule, dive headfirst into legendary battle like the Alamo, and explore how Texas became an independent nation before joining America. But that's not all. Tensions with Mexico exploded into a war that forever reshaped the map of North America. The Mexican American War brought sweeping changes: new territories, the thrilling chaos of the California gold rush, and towns popping up overnight, bustling with dreams, dust, and desperation. This episode is packed with incredible stories, brave settlers, fierce battles, and ordinary people chasing extraordinary dreams. So, tighten your saddle, grab a coffee or chai, whether you are in Jersey Turnpike traffic or sipping a tea back home in Kerala. Let's dive right in. To truly understand the story of Texas, we have to begin with Mexico, because Texas wasn't always its own country, and it wasn't always part of the United States either. Once upon a time, Texas was a northern frontier, a remote region of the Spanish Empire. But by 1821, Mexico fought for and won its independence from Spain, becoming a brand new country, filled with pride, hope, and vast territories stretching from modern day California and Texas all the way down to Central America. And in that new hopeful Mexico, Texas was just one of many remote provinces, wide open lands sparsely populated with lot of potential but not enough people to settle it. So Mexico had an idea. Why not invite settlers, including Americans from neighboring United States, to come and fill up the empty land? They offered cheap land, freedom from debt, and a fresh start. The settlers poured in, bringing their families, their dreams, and their way of life. But these new settlers, they were fiercely independent, culturally different, and not exactly thrilled about following Mexico's laws, especially rules like no slavery, mandatory Catholicism, and loyalty to a faraway government in Mexico City. You see where this is going, right? As more American settlers moved in, tensions grew. Mexico began to regret their invitation, feeling that these newcomers weren't interested in being Mexican. They wanted something else entirely. The settlers, meanwhile, felt their rights and freedom were threatened. These cultural and political tensions simmered beneath the wide open skies of Texas, growing hotter year after year. Eventually, they would boil over into full blown conflict, a fight that would give birth to legends, heroes, and a brand new country flying its own star, the Lone Star Republic. Before going further, let us take a step back. To fully grasp the story of Texas, we need to travel a little further back in time to when Mexico wasn't yet Mexico. Instead, it was known as New Spain, a massive colonial empire controlled from faraway Madrid. For almost 300 years, the Spanish Empire ruled these lands. Picture it: vast territories stretching from present day Mexico up through modern day Texas, California, Arizona, and deep into Central America. It was a place rich in resources, silver, gold, fertile soil, but life wasn't always easy. Spanish rule was tough, rigid, and often harsh, especially for indigenous people who had lived on the lands for thousands of years. By the early 1800s, the air was thick with discontent. People born in the colonies, known as criollos, resented being treated as second class citizens compared to those born in Spain. At the same time, ideas from revolutions far away, like American Revolution and French Revolution, began seeping in. Ideas about freedom, equality, and the right to self govern were spreading like wildfire. And then came the spark. On September 16th, 1910, in a small town called Dolores, a Catholic priest named Miguel Hidalgo rang the church bell and called upon his people to rise up against Spanish rule. His famous cry, known today as El Grito de Dolores, lit the fuse for a revolution. For the next decade, Mexico was consumed by fierce struggle for independence. Battles were fought, heroes rose and fell, and the fight for freedom spread across the land. Hidalgo himself was captured and executed, but his voice echoed on, inspiring others. Finally, in 1821, after 11 years of struggle, Mexico gained its independence from Spain. It was a joyous moment. A new nation was born from dreams and sacrifices of thousands. But independence was just the beginning. Mexico, young and ambitious, now faced the enormous challenge of defining itself. How would this vast nation govern its distant provinces, especially places as remote and rugged as Texas? Now, that is why Mexico was inviting people from United States to come and settle into their province. The dissent and conflicts between the settlers and the Mexican government was simmering for years, leading to a war. The Texas War for Independence was fueled by a complex interplay of political, cultural, and economic factors that escalated tensions between Anglo American settlers and the Mexican government. Initially, Mexico encouraged American immigration to Texas through land grants aiming to develop the sparsely populated region. However, as the Anglo American population grew, cultural and political differences became pronounced. Many settlers, accustomed to the US legal and political systems, found themselves at odds with Mexican laws and governance. A significant point of contention was the issue of slavery. While Mexico had abolished slavery in 1829, many settlers from the American South brought their enslaved people with them, leading to a conflict over Mexican anti slavery laws. This tension over slavery contributed to the settlers' desire for independence. Political changes in Mexico further strained relations. The 1824 Mexican Constitution, which had granted considerable autonomy to the states, was replaced by a centralist regime under President Antonio Lopez de Santa Anna. This shift reduced the local governance in Texas, leading to unrest among settlers who valued self rule. The culmination of these issues led to the outbreak of Texas Revolution in October 1835. The conflict began with the Battle of Gonzales, where settlers resisted Mexican troops attempting to retrieve a cannon symbolizing the settlers' growing defiance. In summary, the Texas War of Independence was the result of escalating disputes over cultural differences, governance, and slavery, leading settlers to seek autonomy from Mexican rule. Alright, now the stage is set. Texas was filled up with settlers mostly from United States, each carrying their own dreams of freedom and fortune. But these dreams soon clashed directly with the reality of Mexican rule, setting off sparks that quickly grew into flames. It all started small, with a single cannon. In the town of Gonzales, settlers had borrowed a small cannon from Mexican government for protection against Native American raids. But in October 1835, Mexican troops arrived asking for the cannon back. The settlers, defiant and fiercely independent, responded with a legendary challenge, raising a banner that simply said, "Come and take it." Shots were fired, and thus began the first real fight of the Texas Revolution. What started as a small skirmish turned into a symbolic declaration of independence. Now, let's move to perhaps one of the most famous events of the entire revolution, the siege of a small mission called the Alamo in San Antonio. For 13 brutal days, a small group of around 200 Texan defenders, including legends like Davy Crockett, William Travis, and Jim Bowie, faced off against a massive Mexican army led by General Antonio Lopez de Santa Anna, numbering in thousands. The defenders fought bravely, desperately, hoping for reinforcements that never came. Eventually, the Alamo fell, and every defender was killed. But their bravery became legendary. The cry, "Remember the Alamo," echoed through Texas, uniting settlers behind a common cause, freedom at any cost. But tragedy didn't end at Alamo. Soon after, in the town of Goliad, Texan troops led by Colonel James Fannin were captured after surrendering to Mexican forces. Despite promises of fair treatment, Santa Anna ordered their execution. Over 300 Texan prisoners were killed, an event remembered as Goliad Massacre. The brutality of this event further ignited passion and resolve among Texans. Finally came the turning point, the Battle of San Jacinto. Under the leadership of General Sam Houston, the Texan army regrouped, waiting patiently for their moment. And when it came, they struck swiftly and decisively. In a surprise attack lasting less than 20 minutes, the Texan forces defeated Santa Anna's troops, capturing the Mexican leader himself. This victory was monumental. Santa Anna, captured and defeated, was forced to recognize Texas independence. It marked the birth of a new country, the Republic of Texas. But freedom comes at a price, and the new Republic of Texas would soon find that independence was just the first step in a much larger, more complicated story. With Texas now proudly flying its Lone Star flag, tensions were growing not just between Texas and Mexico, but between United States and Mexico too. Let's dive into the heart of this explosive era, the Mexican-American War of 1846 to 1848. In 1840s, America was driven by a powerful idea we have heard before, manifest destiny. It was the belief that the United States was meant to stretch from ocean to ocean no matter who or what stood in their way. And this wasn't just talk. It shaped politics, fueled debates, and even led to fiery slogans like 5440 or fight. This catchy phrase referred to the northern border dispute with British controlled Canada in Oregon County. Americans boldly claimed territory up to latitude 5440, that is 54 degrees 40 minutes north, far north into the modern day Canada. Although the US didn't go to the war with Britain over this, the aggressive sentiment made one thing clear: Americans want more land, and they weren't shy about it. But eyes soon turned south to Texas and the vast Mexican territory of California and New Mexico. Remember, Mexico never fully accepted Texas independence. And when Texas joined the United States as its 28th state in 1845, Mexico saw it as a hostile takeover. The two countries couldn't even agree on a border. Was it the Rio Grande as America claimed, or was it Nueces River as Mexico insisted? President James K. Polk, a passionate believer in manifest destiny, decided to force the issue. He ordered American troops under General Zachary Taylor into the disputed area between these two rivers. It was provocative, deliberate, and soon violence erupted. Mexican troops attacked, American soldiers died, and Polk told Congress that American blood had been shed in American soil. War was declared in May 1846. But the problem is, not everyone in America agreed with this war. In fact, it sparked intense debates. While many celebrated the war as America's destiny, others fiercely opposed it. Politicians like Abraham Lincoln, then a young congressman, demanded proof of Polk's claims, questioning whether the war was justifiable or merely an aggressive land grab. Many northern abolitionists feared that the new territory acquired from Mexico would expand slavery westward, upsetting the fragile balance between free and slave states. The war divided neighbors, families, and political parties. Even then, Americans were wrestling with tough questions about expansion, morality, and identity. The war itself was swift but brutal. American forces won a series of decisive victories. General Taylor invaded northern Mexico, capturing cities like Monterrey. Another American general, Winfield Scott, led troops all the way to Mexico City itself, storming the capital in 1847 after fierce fighting. On the Western Front, settlers and soldiers quickly seized control of California and New Mexico. The fighting was relentless and thousands lost their lives on both sides. Ultimately, Mexico, battered and overwhelmed, had no choice but to surrender. In 1848, the war ended officially with the Treaty of Guadalupe Hidalgo. This treaty dramatically reshaped the map of North America. Mexico gave up huge territories, lands that would become modern day California, Nevada, Utah, Arizona, New Mexico, Colorado, and Wyoming. All told, Mexico lost about half its territory to United States. The US in return agreed to pay Mexico $15 million, essentially compensation for the land. And the border issue, it was settled at Rio Grande just as the US had insisted from the start. The Mexican American War left deep scars. For Mexico, it was a devastating defeat, a painful loss of land and pride. For United States, it was a triumph, but one clouded by fierce debates about morality, slavery, and the future of the nation. This war wasn't just a fight over borders. It was a moment that forced America to confront questions about what kind of country it was becoming, and its consequences would echo for generations. After the Mexican American War and the signing of Treaty of Guadalupe Hidalgo, the United States suddenly found itself with a vast new territory. This enormous land acquisition included present day California, Nevada, Utah, Arizona, New Mexico, and parts of Colorado and Wyoming. Almost immediately, the nation faced the challenge of settling and governing these regions. Migration into these newly acquired territories surged rapidly. People from all across the United States began moving west, driven by the prospect of owning land, starting new farms, and establishing communities. The federal government encouraged settlements through land grants and policies that allowed settlers to claim large tracts of lands. The Homestead Act of 1862, although enacted slightly later, exemplified the spirit of the policies by offering free or inexpensive land to families willing to cultivate it. Migration wasn't limited to Anglo American settlers. Diverse groups such as immigrants from Mexico, Europe, and later Asia also moved into these territories, significantly shaping their cultural makeup. The settlement of Southwest accelerated dramatically with the discovery of gold at Sutter's Mill near present day Sacramento, California. It was in January 1848. News of this discovery spread rapidly across the country and soon across the globe, sparking a California gold rush. The gold rush brought an extraordinary wave of migration. In 1848, the population of California was roughly 14,000. By the end of 1849, it had grown approximately 100,000, and by 1852, it had surged to over 250,000. These migrants were known as 49ers, named after the peak year of immigration, 1849. Life during the gold rush was tough, challenging, and often chaotic. Settlements known as boomtowns sprang up practically overnight around mining sites. San Francisco, for example, exploded from a tiny settlement of fewer than 1,000 people in early 1848 to over 25,000 by 1850. Boomtown life was characterized by rapid growth, limited law enforcement, and frequent violence. Crime rates were high, and vigilante justice was common. The vast majority of prospectors did not find significant amount of gold. Those who did often spent it rapidly in local saloons, gambling halls, and supply shops. However, some individuals and businesses thrived by providing goods and services, selling mining equipment, clothing, food, and lodging. Entrepreneurs like Levi Strauss, who developed durable denim pants for miners, made lasting fortunes by serving needs of the miners themselves. Yes, the same Levi Strauss that we buy jeans pants now. The massive influx of people and rapid economic development quickly highlighted the need for formal governance. Initially, California was governed by military governor appointed by the US government. However, it soon became clear that the territory required civil administration and laws to handle its growing population. In September 1849, Californians held a constitutional convention drafting a state constitution that explicitly banned slavery. This was reflecting tensions that were rapidly dividing the nation. California applied for statehood later that year, setting off intense national debates. Southern states opposed California's admission as a free state, fearing it could disrupt the balance of power in Congress. This dispute was eventually resolved by compromise of 1850. California was officially admitted as the 31st state on September 9, 1850, just 2 years after becoming the US territory. This rapid progression from remote territory into a full statehood underscores the dramatic impact of gold rush and westward migration. Thus, settlement of American Southwest was marked by significant migration, dramatic economic changes driven by the gold rush, and swift political developments. These events laid the foundation for the region's future and profoundly shaped the trajectory of United States. And with that, we close the chapter on Texas independence and Mexican-American War and the dramatic reshaping of America's Southwest. But history never stands still. In our next episode, we will step into an era known as Age of Reform, a powerful wave of social changes that swept across America, transforming societies, challenging beliefs, and reshaping what it meant to be American. But before we wrap up, a quick request. If you are enjoying our journey through American history, please take a moment to rate, follow, and share this podcast. Your support truly keeps the wheels turning and help others joining our adventure. Thank you for listening. Stay curious, stay connected, and I'll see you again soon right here on US History, Understanding This Country.